Good morning, Zakia. Thank you for joining me on my podcast this morning.
Thank you for having me. I'm really happy to be here.
So we've worked together for almost a year now after we met randomly at an arrival event. Well, we'd gone to the wrong place at the wrong time and just met by chance, which was they're always the best kind of meetings, aren't they? And we've worked on Invisible Cities together for the last 10, 11 months. And for those who don't know you, tell us who you are and what Invisible Cities does.
So I'm the founder and CEO of Invisible Cities. We are a social enterprise working in travel and trying to think about tourism differently. So we train people who have an experience of homelessness to become tour guides of their own city and offer walking tours based on people's interests, life stories, passions. So unique walking tours, but also that give back to the community because we employ people, but also kind of organize a lot of different things around awareness of homelessness and social issues in the UK. So that's in Edinburgh, where I'm based, but also in Glasgow, Manchester, York, Cardiff, and the Scottish borders.
And spreading that message and raising that awareness means you travel a huge amount, don't you? You speak at a lot of events, you host training sessions, you host networking events. We had the first Doing Tourism Differently event just a couple of weeks ago. Bearing in mind all those different things that you're juggling, what's the one thing that would make your life that little bit easier?
It's a really good question and one I think about a lot. I think being able to go to places a little faster would be good.
Yeah,
Though I'm one
yeah,
of these people who quite like the travel time. You know, I
yeah,
like being in an airport and I like being in the train station or on the train because it makes you think about or take the time you don't always have otherwise. But I think, see, when we do invent teleportation, I think that will be great for me because I do spend a lot of time between cities in the UK where we're based, but
yeah.
also, in France where I'm from, or all over. And sometimes you just wish you wouldn't, spend 10 hours
Yeah,
somewhere,
yeah.
traveling somewhere. So I think that would be the one thing that would make life a little bit easier.
Well, when you find the answer to teleportation, can you let me know as well? Because that will be magical.
I know, I
And
know.
talking of events and speaking opportunities, where have you been so far this year, and what have been some of the best events you've been to in terms of potentially events that are focusing a light on social good and businesses in the travel and tourism space with purpose and that kind of thing?
Strangely enough, I think I haven't been to as many events this year than I have in the past. Maybe that's testament to how busy we are and all the amazing things
Yeah,
we're doing.
yeah.
I mean, Arrival is always, for me, a really great event, and we are proof that it is because that's where we met and connected and started working together. But it's always where I've met the most interesting people and the long-lasting kind of relationships. Um, the in February, I attended the National Geographic's
Yeah.
reveal of their best in travel list in New York City, which was magical in itself. And I was nominated or awarded one of the Travelers of the Year on that list, which was brilliant. But I think it alongside that in that list was also Dolly Parton, which was really, really
Amazing.
exciting. I know, and it was. I didn't really know it was what to expect on the day, and it was organised quite quickly. And I think it was obviously an amazing event. But what really stood out is that you had a lot of different highlights on people in the travel industry or initiatives that I had never heard about before. I think because sometimes I can be very Europe centric. So that was amazing to be more, in the Americas. So I left really, really inspired. It was a great celebration of people who do a lot of really grassroots stuff. I met someone from Mexico who runs a lot of indigenous kind of focused products and tours and campaigns and activities, and she is such a brilliant kind of advocate for that, and it was somehow, even though it was a big name like National Geographic's, it was a very intimate event, so that was lovely. And in New York City, so absolutely amazing. But also, shameless plug here. I think our own event, Tourism Differently, in September in Edinburgh was definitely a highlight for me. The feedback I still receive is really, really good. People who have set up meetings on the back of it. And when you run these events, it's quite hard sometimes to grasp what happens. You can't really measure that. And so people who say, I met such and such at the event and now we're working together, or the atmosphere was like, it's made me think about this and that. And so that's also probably a highlight for me.
Yeah. There's two really interesting points there from both of those events about creating authentic events, especially when it comes to things like championing sustainability or social purpose or diversity, inclusion, accessibility, because those events are only really worthwhile if they do open your eyes to new things. They do put new opportunities in front of you. They do encourage action. And it sounds like that both of those events are both really good examples with that, because there are
Yeah.
so many events that on paper are designed to do those things, but actually there's not really a huge amount of substance behind that.
Yeah. And there is something to be said about sometimes events can be too big. So some events are just too large. You get lost in the middle of all of this.
Mm.
And you talk with a lot of, and in travel I think we can do that a lot, like you talk a lot with a lot of potential clients and people,
Yeah,
and then you come back and nothing very much happens from that. And so I try to stay away from those, but it is incredibly hard, to kind of facilitate this meeting of people and nurturing and see what happens from that. I think it's,
yeah,
yeah, the best thing that can happen from an event, but also the hardest thing to make happen.
yeah, absolutely. And with you traveling a lot and traveling between all of the cities that have Invisible Cities guides in, where do you find you work at your best? When do you have your best ideas?
So I work from home, and I have worked from home for the last 15 years. I worked from
Yeah.
home when it wasn't a thing, and when people would say, "Oh, is she even working?" So, um, but even more than that. But so sometimes it really depends on the mood, right? Sometimes I can be really efficient at home. Sometimes I like to take myself out completely and work from a cafe, even if it's my local little cafe, because you're out, there are fewer distractions,
Yeah.
and you can focus. I really like working from, hotel lobbies and cafes and things like that. I think um I'd like to believe that I can get organized, but as years go by, I realize that, you know, my attention span gets smaller and smaller, and
Yeah.
then, my to-do list gets larger and larger. And if things don't get to the top, then it's less likely that I'll look at it. So I think
Yeah.
anything that can get me hyper focused is good.
Yeah.
And so a cafe is usually good. And even see if I'm in Manchester, for example, and spending the night in a hotel because we're spending a couple of days there, I won't really work from the hotel room. I'd probably
Yeah.
take myself to a cafe and work from there. Um, so I think, and airport lounges, I can't work on the train because I get really like sick. So The train time is more thinking time, but
Yeah,
otherwise airports and an environment where I feel I can fit in a couple of things,
yeah,
is usually when I find good productive time.
yeah,
And yeah, so I quite, I always say that I really like, and I like arriving at the airport way early, like
yeah,
too early for what I need to do. And then, which I was reading about the other day, that apparently it's really bad because when airports manage the flow of people, they don't count people like me who arrive 3 hours before rather than one. So you kind of screw a little bit all that flow. But anyway, I really like, yeah, sitting down with a coffee and actually doing a bit of work before taking a couple of hours flying
yeah.
and just thinking about it.
Yeah, I'm exactly the same. Isn't it funny how we can hyper focus in really busy environments, airports,
Yeah,
cafes, coffee shops, hotel lobbies, but not in the peace and quiet of our own homes? I'm exactly the same.
yeah.
You mentioned your to-do list, and if things get too far down the list that they just don't get done. Tell me about something that you really want to do but has been on your to-do list for too long. Maybe it's a project that just hasn't had the right scope or bandwidth yet that you really want to tackle.
I think a really big one is something that's been on my to-do list for probably over a year, maybe 2 years, is around a piece of work and research on how to make tours more accessible for people and not just
Yeah,
physically accessible, which I live in the city. Edinburgh is not great when it comes to accessibility because there's an old town part, loads of cobbles, loads of hills,
yeah, yeah.
loads of the historical, buildings and stuff. So I would really like to work on a piece of research around accessibility for as many people as possible and what that means for different groups of travelers. And it's been on the list for so long because it requires, I think, collaboration with a lot of different people
Mm,
with those lived experience of finding activities or tours inaccessible, but also of trying to find the right format for it. So I
yeah,
think in terms of planning, that'll come through in 2025. There's a few things that have happened over the last few months that I think mean we can really work on it next year.
yeah.
But working with the people that we work with, you kind of have people with learning difficulties maybe or other barriers to fully enjoying a tour. And I think that
Mm,
it would be amazing if we could find a way to make our content and tours accessible to
absolutely.
them.
Yeah,
So it's been on there and getting towards the bottom of that list for a long time. So I hope
yeah.
that it'll get given some priority next year.
Absolutely. And I think in terms of that collaboration piece, people are now genuinely looking at accessibility as a whole rather than accessibility meaning wheelchair access. That's not enough, or pushchair access. That you're just kind of touching on the very basic fundamentals there, aren't you? But
Yeah.
making content and storytelling accessible to people with all sorts of different needs and levels of understanding and communication skills, it makes it so much more important and exciting to be able to tackle, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And also because it's really, really exciting to work with people because people are so different from one another. But what it means is that you have different barriers for different folks. So I don't know if you can ever tackle all of the barriers and all the accessibility that's needed, but somehow it makes it exciting to think about all these things. And down to the little things that we can do as an automatic thing to purposely designing things that are easier for non-native speakers or for people with dyslexia or whatever it is, and I think it's an exciting time because you're absolutely right. People think about these more and more as we're more and more comfortable talking about being dyslexic or being, having attention kind of not focusing on different things or whatever,
Yeah.
the general conversation is about. So yeah, it's an exciting time.
And I know earlier this year you were networking with the one and only Prince Harry through an initiative with Travelist around companies with social purpose and creating impact in the travel space. I noticed recently that Prince William is also doing a lot specifically around homelessness and with his new TV series. Do you think that's a force for good? Do you think it's authentic? Do you think it will make a difference? Do you think it is possible for an ambassador like him to tackle homelessness in a really meaningful way? What are your thoughts?
Um, it's a really interesting question, and I think so. I've seen little bits of the documentary that's coming out, and I think that's exactly one of the questions that he gets asked. Do you think you are the best person
Mm,
to talk about this in a world of super privileged people and, people facing so many challenges? I think the platform that he offers, the voice that he has, is incredibly powerful for the people that do the work on the ground and
yeah,
is a voice that none of us can afford to have. And I think that what I really admire about this homelessness kind of coalition, the project, is the power of collaboration. It's all done
yeah,
with grassroots organization in different parts of the UK coming together and not only doing work together, which is absolutely needed, but also work with the Royal Foundation or work with, different people to have that awareness and that voice
mm,
kind of heard. And I would say using his voice for that is incredibly, to be respected. Like you have
yeah,
to give him that, and it's needed, And again, I mean, I look at Invisible Cities, but it could be any other organization, being given a platform like this wouldn't happen without that. And it's the same for
yeah,
Travel List and Harry to some extent. It's also, look at the consequences it's had just for us to have
yeah,
this mention in the days after our conversation and all these publications. This is marketing we can't really even pay for,
yeah,
like you
yeah,
don't really have. So I think we have to work in the real world, and I think that we have to admit to recognize that, and it makes it really exciting and I think really positive to work
mm,
with people like that in the world. And 100%, I think they've understood rightly that the power comes from people on the ground doing the work, and the experts in the field of homelessness are the local organizations and the people who
mm,
work with people every day of the year. And if they're used just as a way to have those voices heard, then 100% I think is the right way to do it.
yeah, absolutely. And on the topic of high profile collaborations and um, figureheads, tell me about someone you would absolutely love to meet that you've never met and you think would be fascinating to have a coffee in an airport with or share a train journey between Edinburgh and Manchester with.
So they've got to be alive, right, to be able to meet them in an airport.
But I'm going to let you have any, past or
Yeah,
present.
it can be like, you know, who I really love and admire is Amal Clooney, George Clooney's wife,
Yes,
um,
yeah,
who is obviously a powerhouse of a woman, and some of the work that she does as a lawyer is I think, some of the hardest things, but also, some of the most worthwhile kind of causes, and it feels so big, and yet, so I really admire that, her work and her commitment to that. I mean, obviously she's gorgeous and also in that world of glam and, Hollywood. um I don't know, I was going to use, yeah, so I think I would absolutely love to meet her and chat to her about combining all of this and
Yeah.
doing it. So, and sometimes I think about her and I think we haven't heard from her in a long time, and it's probably because she's busy working on,
Yeah, yeah.
war crimes in this part of the world, and so she is um incredible. But yeah, I think anyone who works at it's issues and that are so can be so doom and gloom and so yet so
Mm.
important and so difficult to tackle, and yet somebody's got to do it, and I think it's remarkable some of the things that she works on. So she would
Yeah.
probably be
That's a
up
great
there on the list.
example.
It's yeah, I think it's I mean, and she's married to George Clooney, so that's fine as well. But but I think she's definitely somebody that, and she speaks all these languages and has this multicultural
Yeah.
um heritage, and I think she's amazing, but I would really like to meet her.
Well, you never know. I mean, these things can happen, can't they? I mean, Prince Harry and then Amal, who knows? It
I
could
know, we're
easily
not that
happen.
far removed, for
Um,
sure.
Going back to the topic of time and opportunities and making things happen, if you had an extra day in the week that nobody else got to have, what would you do with it? Are you good at switching off from work, or would you be busy working on a new project?
I was reading something this morning about that. I think when you run an organization or are passionate about your work, or it's not so much like switching off and not being in front of a computer or not being in front of a list or whatever. It's I always think about work. I always think about the projects. I always think about
Mm.
opportunities. And by default, if I meet someone new, I always think, oh, how could we work with them, or
Mm.
how could we collaborate and things. So for that part, I'm really bad because I really think about it all the time. Um, and I think with an extra day, I'd probably think about it a little bit more. But I try to read a lot, and I would probably spend time reading even
Yeah.
more. Book talk is my new thing, and so I really love. It's quite fun because some of the like if you read a lot of different titles and things, and sometimes I go into the local bookshop and I'm like, how come these titles are advertised? How do people know about them? And
Yeah,
actually,
yeah,
it's because they've been probably how I learned about them, which is through my algorithms or whatever. Um, so I would probably spend time reading, which I love, and I read a lot of different things. So that's
yeah,
also something I'm incredibly happy about is that I can read, different genres, and it doesn't
yeah,
have to be super, super deep and life changing. I really love, short novels, and then that's it. You can forget about in a way because
yeah,
it's
yeah,
entertaining for a few hours, and then that's it. So I would probably do that. But weather depending, I would probably also go walking. I really like that. But well, yeah, I don't know. That's probably the healthy version of me is saying that now,
yeah,
but
yeah.
actually, how true is that? I don't know. Yeah, but I would definitely try not for it to be about work for sure.
Yeah, yeah. Tell me either something you've read recently that you've really enjoyed or what you're reading at the moment and enjoying.
Um, when I was a teenager, I read a book, obviously from an American writer, but translated in French, called A Thousand Women. It was about a tribe in the US exchanging with the US government 1,000 horses for 1,000 white women,
Wow.
so that they could have women to have children with and somehow produce children that would be whiter and whiter with each
Oh my
generation.
gosh.
It was, and that it's a book that I read and I absolutely loved, and it kind of stayed with me. And I kid you not, recently I found it in a charity shop in the original version.
Wow. Oh my
So I
gosh.
bought it. And so I'm rereading this, obviously as an adult now, so a little bit more like with the criticism and
Yeah,
education and
yeah.
experience. And I still love it. So it's about one of the women that gets traded is actually a really educated white woman who was sent to prison because she had a kid out of wedlock, as they do.
Oh
So
gosh.
very scandalous life. So
Yeah.
she was imprisoned. And obviously they found these women in prisons, asylums, places where so she kind of embarks on that journey thinking, well, it'll be better than where I'm at currently. And she learns about the culture and the tradition, and she keeps a
Mm.
diary and all of this. So it's all about that journey. And it's a brilliant book, but it's funny how sometimes, there's only a few. When I was younger, I loved like um American culture and
Mm.
learning about different indigenous communities and First Nations in Canada or whatever, all of that. And I had so many books about that. And then somehow this one, when I spotted it on the shelf, I was like, I know this book. So I'm rereading this. So it's not a surprise, but it's a little bit different because it's in English this time.
I love that. I love that you've just discovered that, having read it however many years ago.
I know.
And some books just really stay with you, don't they? And rereading them through a fresh set of eyes must be quite interesting because you'll pick up on so many different nuances to you did first time. Um,
Yeah.
In terms of events in the industry, obviously you kind of span travel and tourism, social enterprise, local community. Where might we see you next out and about? Where are you traveling to next?
So next week I'm going to Tourism Innovation Summit in Spain, in Seville, um, to be part of a panel, but also we are nominated for an award the night before the panel. So depending on the results, you might see me fresh faced or not.
Or not?
No. So it is a big event in my, book, and I think it's so we'll see. I think a lot of people have reached out already to see if we could meet up and things, so that's quite nice. Um, so that's next week, and then I'm also very excited. It's more of it's not an event opened up to everyone. It's TripCon, which is organized by the amazing Mitch Back in New York for training of guides and tour leaders and
Mm.
more of the empowerment of these voices. So I'll be speaking on the 12th of November at that, more as a kind of out of the program voice and between two training sessions, listen to the story of invisible cities.
Yeah,
So that's nice. And in terms of smaller events in November in Scotland, we have the Social Enterprise Conference,
yeah,
which I might not go to, but there's the Social Enterprise Awards, which I always try to go to at the Scottish Parliament. So I'm going to try and go to that. It's always quite nice to catch up with other social enterprises that you may know.
yeah.
Then, yeah, and a few more in between, so we'll see.
And I've got to ask, have the years ahead got expansion plans for Invisible Cities? Might you be launching in new cities in the UK or further afield?
Yes, 100%. So I think over the years, what's been really interesting, I think, is that sometimes plans haven't gone accordingly. So, for example, people often ask about Liverpool as a city for us, and we're nowhere near ready in Liverpool. So, sometimes the expansion doesn't work out as planned. But some other times, I think the for us, finding the right partners on the ground is the most
Mm,
important thing. And because of the amazing coverage we've had recently, but also, a lot of the connections through time and meeting different people, some cities have emerged as great potential in the UK, which is quite interesting. And then the plan has always been, to expand internationally. So,
Yeah.
that is most likely to be in the EU, in Europe first. Though, in before COVID, before 2020, I did a lot of work actually in America, in the US through,
Mm.
hiring different guides from different voices. I think the interest is definitely there for having a more diverse range of stories. But I think the issue of homelessness in the US is such a big
Yeah.
beast, and it's completely different to what happens in the UK, in Western Europe, even, that
Mm.
I think the risk is too big for us.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, yes, definitely. I think reinforcing the cities we have in the next couple of years is definitely on the cards. And then also expanding in Scotland with Scottish cities, but also in the
Yeah.
rest of the UK, before we launch in Europe. So, and it's the beauty of, that's why I love working in travel so much, is that it is an international community, and you can, that collaboration and
Yeah.
facilitation does exist, and it's very easy to, or it's a lot easier than in other sectors to make it
Yeah.
happen. And so, and I'm incredibly thankful to all the people who reached out and said, I live in Bristol, why don't you come here? I live
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
Brighton, why don't you come here? And so I try to answer all these messages and say, right, okay. Or similarly, I've had chats with organizations in different cities who said, we don't really think this could work here for XYZ reasons.
Yeah.
And that's incredible hints at, information. And the plan, I would say, is to be more proactive when it comes to our expansion and really decide on a city rather than what we've done so far, which has been reacting to amazing
Sure.
partnerships. But it's always the balance of resources and capacity and
Yeah.
time and what funding is available and all of that. So we have an incredible partner in Cardiff, the Woolwich, who also operate in other parts of Wales. So,
Mm.
so it's a wink to them to say, the plan is also to also expand beyond Cardiff
Yeah.
with them.
Yeah.
But also in, Oxford, I know is in your heart as well
Yeah.
as a next leg, to expand. And it's, realistically, it's the most important thing to have the resource locally and the
Yeah.
drive to make that happen.
Absolutely. And it sounds like next year and beyond are going to be incredibly exciting and very busy. And Invisible Cities is really easy to find, isn't it? Literally, if anyone Googles Invisible Cities, you'll find the website and all the social channels and your profile as well. So hopefully lots of people will connect with you after this is released and want to find out more about what you do. I can't not mention the fact that we're coming up to Christmas and that it's a really important time, not just for Invisible Cities, but for those experienced and impacted by homelessness as well. What's the easiest way for people to support Invisible Cities and the guides and those who are impacted by homelessness at this time of year?
You're absolutely right. It's a hard time for people when they realize that they don't really have a lot of people around them to celebrate or
Mm.
be with at Christmas. So we will have our usual gift vouchers that you can gift to all of your loved ones, colleagues, to come on tours and discover our experience. Which you can buy all year round, but obviously we really focus on as a Christmas
Mm.
present in that time of year. We're also going to do a wee bit of a campaign to raise funds to support the guides and the trainees and what we call supported volunteers. So people who've been part of the program over the years, but maybe dipped in and out
Yeah.
with things like groceries and gift vouchers and things like that. So that'll be up and running soon. As well. What's really important to us, in the same way that we promote people to have their own voices heard and their own stories, is for people to have the choice to do what they want at Christmas. And if they
Yeah.
want to
Yeah.
have a Christmas dinner, they can. If they don't want to, they don't have to. And that's being respectful of culture, of tradition, of
Yeah.
life stories, you know. So what we want is of course, we'll signpost people to the different meals that are organizing, but
Mm,
also for them to have access to groceries so they can do whatever they want in that time. And if that's mac and cheese with themselves, that's what it is, you know.
yeah, yeah.
Um, there will be a campaign where you can donate to. We also have a whole range of merchandise that you can get as Christmas presents. The most important thing is always the awareness. Spread the word
Mm,
about Invisible Cities to whoever you're talking to, whether it's somebody who you know will travel to the UK, to one of our cities, to a potential partners, a hotel, a corporate. You
yeah.
can also buy those tours as a pay it forward gift. So if you are a corporate or a team, you can pay for a local organization or a group to come on a tour for free and discover Manchester for the first time, or just be able to go on a fun activity without having to pay. So that will also all be visible and available on the website very soon.
Amazing. My phone just fell out, but I can still hear you. Um, it's been so good to catch up with you this morning, Zakia, and um, it's a real privilege, isn't it, to be able to tell people about invisible cities because it is such a force for good. So a bit of hasty editing needed there. Sorry about that, Zakia. We got so carried away with the conversation that we ran out of time.
It
Um,
happened.
So all that's left to say really is a massive thank you for chatting to me this morning. I know people are going to be really keen to find out more about Invisible Cities and the work you do and how we can have a really positive impact on communities and all of that kind of thing. So thank you. Is there anything else you wanted to say before we say goodbye for now?
No, thank you. And, it's so great working with you. And I'm glad to kind of cross over in something else that you do, and spread the word about who we are and what we stand for. So always so appreciated.
Amazing. I will see you very soon. Thanks again.
Bye.